When is this crypto top forming, and is the market going to collapse? Well, the market is still holding up. Bitcoin puts in a slightly higher low on increased volume, up 3% in the last 24 hours. And some altcoins are still holding their ground at the top. On top of that, we have stock markets going to new all-time high prices. So what does all this mean, and why do I keep going on about what a top feels like? Let's dive into that in today's video. Like and subscribe. It's your home of macro cycle analysis. Remember that word macro. We're studying the past to forecast the future. Cryptos, Bitcoin, stock markets, commodities, and real estate. All right, guys, let's dive into the video. We're looking at the stock markets first up because we have hit a new, fresh, all-time high closing price for the SP500, the E-mini futures contract. The Dow Jones is still up again. In the last 24 hours, it has closed slightly higher than the previous close on Friday, which means it is another new all-time high daily closing price. For the Dow Jones E-mini futures here, it is 2.5% above the previous all-time high. So what does all of this mean for Bitcoin and cryptos? It's what we're going to get into in just a moment. I just want to review how these markets have performed because you guys know over the last couple of years, we've been following these markets and suggesting that the top or the all-time high prices weren't in 2021 and 2022, and that we would see new all-time high prices in this 18 to 20 year real estate and economic cycle. Now, I know I've said a lot of words there. Let's just focus on the charts and have a look at what's going on for Bitcoin and cryptos as well, as we're continuing to see the momentum to the upside. For the NASDAQ, it also closed at a new all-time high price. Highest weekly close in history was on Friday. Today, highest daily close in history. And in terms of a new all-time high price, now, I know I've talked about closing prices, but also just the intraday price. It's 0.5 point off a new all-time high price. So I guess many of you and myself would probably bet that we would see a new all-time high price in 2023 for the NDX. Now, for the SP 500, this just hit a new all-time high closing price. You can see here the closing price was 4,790. We have to go all the way back to late 2021 in December. And of course, the top was in early January 2022. So basically coming up to dead on, or almost 2 years. There is our closing price line, this white line here. And it is basically, well, it's closed above all of the previous tops. This is signaling, at least in my own analysis, that we will see further upside. We will see further prices higher than what we have seen, regardless of if there is a recession in 2024, regardless of any of the economic bad news that we've been hearing for the last 2 years. Remember that, it's been 2 years. We heard a lot about it in 2022, which essentially was a correction in a macro bull market. But at the time, everyone was talking about this market collapsing. Don't ever forget that, because the idea around what they were saying didn't come true, and the markets continued on from that point, which cost a lot of people a lot of money. So we've looked at the market climb back all of those losses throughout 2023 and is basically at the same price as before. Is it a double top? Are we going to collapse from this point? All of these questions are basically valid. But if we're looking at a even bigger cycle, a macro cycle here, in my own analysis, I believe we're going to see higher and higher prices over the coming years before we get to a big peak and then, of course, a collapse from that point. In terms of prices to the downside, I don't think we're going to see prices below the 50% levels again. So even if we do get a correction, just watch where that correction comes in. The previous tops, maybe some of the previous lows here, and also our 50% levels. We just have to see where this top comes in, because this might not even be the top right now. We might see a top higher up, and then we could potentially see a bit of a correction to these levels before we start to head up again. That's what I'm anticipating for the first half of 2024. And it seems like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are just holding their ground at this point. And there's been a couple of major questions that have come up about altcoins. And this is the stuff that I also believed when I was starting out in cryptocurrencies. We have a lot to unpack on altcoins and Bitcoin coming up, but I just want to direct your attention to the links in the video description. BitGet, they have 0% fees when you buy cryptocurrency using a credit or debit card. You'll also get 1% cash back. So check out the link in the top of the video description. It is a limited time offer. Remember, that was 0% fees buying cryptos, and maybe you might want to buy just stable coins at this stage in the market, or whatever you want. I'm just suggesting that based on what we're looking at in today's video. Plus, there is a 1% cash back offer as well. Link in the video description. I'll leave it up to you. Let's get back to it. Cryptos are up. We can see that here. We got Rune. We got many other cryptos that have been up as well. We've got Solana, which is pushing to try to take out this top again. And I'm going to point out Injective as well, because that has pushed to a new fresh price. And I'm happy to talk about these, even though I know I'm looking at this top being in for now before we get some sort of correction. This to me is what tops look like, which is why I'm talking about them day after day. The point that I'm trying to make here is, what type of trader are you? And that's going to depend entirely on you and what your holding period is, which is why we get so much confusion between our own opinions. And you can see it in the comment section, and of course on Twitter and all that sort of stuff, because some people are holding short term, like our traders here in the Investor Accelerator. You can see the trading results. They are making their short-term gains off these meme coins, longing them or shorting them, or whatever they're doing with their own portfolios, making gains, trading short-term. This is on a 4-hour chart. So some of them have gone down to a 4-minute chart. So you can see that there are gains to be made to the upside and the downside. So I just have to come back to this and what your position is in the market. Do you want to hold for a longer period of time, weeks, months? Maybe you want to hold for over 12 months because you don't want to pay the tax or you don't have the time to trade. The arguments always stem from not understanding what the other person's position is. My position here, as I've said, and I said it in the intro, I'm more of a macro trader. So I'm looking at the longer term moves, and I have been talking a lot about Bitcoin potentially coming to a top, whether it's at 45 or 48. To me, it doesn't really matter because of the risk to the upside. I don't think there's much more to go, even if it goes beyond it, before we start to see some sort of correction. At that point, another fantastic buying opportunity for the longer term, which I'm looking here as the medium to longer term, the weeks to months, not necessarily the hours or days, which you'd be in and out of the market more often. So what is your holding period? So if we can identify that, then we won't have all the arguments that we have with, well, you're missing out on the upside, or you're going to see a correction and you're going to get absolutely destroyed. So figure that one out. And to figure that out, we look at the risk. Well, what's the risk to the upside compared to the downside? And that all depends on the time frame. If you're just looking at this little pump here for Solana, you've got 5% to the upside, but where is your stop to the downside? So that's essentially all it's about. If you're going to get out if the market broke down from this swing bottom, well, then you've got a pretty good risk reward there. Maybe you think there's more upside and the market's going to go to $80 or $100, and then you look at the downside and you go, oh, well, there's not too much to the downside. Even if I lose this little bit here of 10, 15%, I stand to make maybe 30 or 45%. So you've got a good risk to reward. But this is the big one here, because I know a lot of people prefer just to buy and hold for the longer term. If we are looking at the longer term here, and we're trying to anticipate that, well, Solana or any of these altcoins have got 100% move to go, do you really think it's going to happen after this entire move? We've seen roughly 13 weeks to the upside. Do we really think we're going to see another several 100% now or in the next couple of months over maybe a possible correction? Maybe that correction comes a little bit higher and we start to trend down into a zone here, which would be another fantastic buying opportunity, which would then reset the risk and reward. You've got less risk to the downside and more potential reward to the upside. So that's the first big point that we need to assess when it comes down to our own trading. Some think this market is just going to hold this level forever and then break out again. And some think the market may break down, maybe it has a little bit further to go, and then break down to give us a higher low, which is still a strong setup. And then we can go to new higher prices. If we're looking at holding these altcoins for that period of time, then it might not be the wisest thing to be getting in at this stage, because even if it does go up a little bit higher, there might be a better opportunity in the coming months, and that comes down to patience. Like we have from Charlie Munger here, rest in peace. The world is full of foolish gamblers, and they will not do as well as the patient investors. Warren Buffett, the stock market is designed to transfer money from the active to the patient. And so if we're all getting hyped up at the tops, potentially the tops, hasn't been proven yet, but it doesn't look like it wants to really push that much further to give us the reward for the potential risk, then we just have to weigh on the side of the patience here. Men who can both be right and sit tight are uncommon. Remember the quotes about patience, and that's something that we really do not see when it comes to cryptocurrencies because it's all new and it's fun, it's exploding. Let's get on the side of the meme coins and all that sort of stuff. But if we can learn this and then understand how it works within our own portfolios, we're going to do a lot better than the majority of people. So what about cryptos holding their current prices and not giving us that entry opportunity? This can obviously plague our minds as well. The possibility of cryptos holding the current price and never coming back down to give us a better entry, from what I've seen, I think it's highly unlikely. What we see in the past is that they do like to do 50% off, 60% off, 80% off. And from what price does that happen? Maybe this shoots to 500. Even if it shot to 500, doubling of the previous all-time high. Now, before Bitcoin's even hit a new all-time high, think about the probabilities that this has to make in order to get there. And I'm choosing $500 because it's multiple hundreds of percent move from the current price, which is the reward that I would want to see. Say 500 at a ridiculous extreme example, stay with me, 80% off still brings it back to $100. Sure, it's slightly higher than where it is now, but the possibility or the probability of it going to 500 is pretty ridiculous. Pretty ridiculous considering Bitcoin hasn't even hit a new all-time high price. And I'm choosing 80% off because in the past it has done 80%. Even Ethereum has done 80% off in the past, and it continues to do that as well, even at its higher rates here. You can see around 4,900 down to the low here, it did 82%. Sure, that was in a bear market, but it was the second largest cryptocurrency. It does those 80% off moves. Even in the accumulation period, Ethereum was still doing massive discounts. You can see it ran all the way up to $360. When we go down to just the lows here in December, so that's these bottoms just here, it's roughly about 67, 70% off. COVID drop got it down to 75%. So if you want to run with 60% off, then you can start to look at where could that price target be. And that's how you can start to assess the risk and reward, and will cryptos hold their current price? Because that is one of the major things that scares us out of taking profits. What if these cryptos never come down? And I mean, for the probabilities, it's really, really unlikely that these cryptos would never come down. Even the best companies in the world come down. We saw Amazon drop 50% from the highs. We've seen Google drop 50% from its highs. We saw Facebook drop 70% from its highs. And yes, it has recovered from that point, but even the best companies in the world still have massive drawdowns. If you think your own cryptocurrency is going to be so special that it never has that drawdown, then I direct you to Luna. Everyone thought Luna would never collapse and essentially went to zero. So in today's video, it was really about trying to figure out what happens next. And the main thing I wanted to stress here is figure out what type of trader you are. Don't get into battles with people and wondering whether the price is going to pump or dump. Just stick to what type of trader you are. What's the time frame you plan to hold on? What do you think the risk is to the upside and the downside? And I've given you some examples on how to assess that risk to the upside and the downside with crazy targets to the upside and pretty fair reductions from that point, pretty fair drawdowns from that price. And then if you still find yourself in the headspace of will they just hold their price and not come down, then I suggest you go back and study history again. We've taken a look at a couple of examples already. Go back and look at them for some of your own cryptos. And if your crypto doesn't have the history to show whether it does come down in some of these times, then we have Bitcoin to have a look at as well. And looking at the time frames to the upside, as we've suggested many times before, it might be coming to the end of a move. Although we might have a little bit left in the tank here to the upside, 8 weeks is pretty substantial to the upside. And if this market, if Bitcoin does go above these previous tops here at about 44 to 45,000, this would then increase this reading from 8 to 10. If it happens this week, it would then be 10 weeks to the upside, basically higher lows and higher highs. So that's going to be a very long time to the upside. We haven't seen one of these 10 weeks to the upside since 2020, leading into that new all-time high. But don't let that fool you. It's a different time in the market, and just because it does 10 weeks up doesn't mean it has to go to a new all-time high. It's essentially just looking at a point where the market could pause or have a correction. And if we are in this environment pre-halving, then I think it's likely that we'll see some sort of correction, and it's a matter of being ready at that point. Now, the correction could take several weeks, So just be prepared. I wouldn't be getting in just 2 days down like a lot of influencers talk about. So have that funds available in case we see a little bit longer of a move to the downside. This comment sums it up beautifully from my post here on X, just looking at how these markets have broken to new all-time highs. So the high risk to be buying now as they hold the line. There's possibly small gains at the moment, but they're not worth the risk to the downside, depending, of course, on your time frame. Shorter term, you're probably going to have some more opportunities up and down. But if you're looking for the longer term, I think there is a better opportunity a little later on, which then answers this particular question here. The pullback yesterday, is that what I was talking about? Definitely not. I'm not looking at daily stuff here. We're looking at a longer term picture. And if the daily does pull back, it might just be part of another move that is building up to then go higher or lower. I'm not looking at the daily, but I am looking at a longer correction in the coming weeks. So if we get that top continue to form and we get that correction, I suspect it'll take another several weeks. So in the short term, keep a lookout for BTC if it is able to break 44K. That would probably suggest that we're going to go and test some high prices, potentially that 48K. If it is unable to get above 44K, then I'll be looking to these lows that have just formed here at 40,500 and 40,200 as well. So look out for those lows to break down. Bitcoin's giving us a good narrow trading range, and then it can give us a signal as to what we could expect to the upside or the downside in the coming days. As for a narrative, well, we've got the ETF coming up in the first or second week of January. Maybe this thing just holds around to that point and then eventually dies off. You can see the energy in the market that has led up into this time frame. And we know about those buy the rumor, sell the news type of events. Once the event is out, then market typically sells off. And sometimes you get that front running where it happens a week or two beforehand. To make matters even more interesting, we're leading into Christmas, Boxing Day holidays, New Year's holidays as well. And there is less trading activity over the next couple of weeks. So keep that in mind as well as we finish up 2023. You can see that this has already happened, what we talked about on the charts, the market running into 50%, closing above, getting rejected, closing under. So the next couple of weeks are going to be pretty interesting. It's happened every single time in the past where the market has run up to 50%, tested it, closed under, tried to close above, and it's just taken a few weeks for it to basically come back and have that bit of a correction. From this top where it hit and peaked to the scare day or the scare week here in September, that case was 3 months trading around these tops. I don't expect it's going to happen like that again, 3 months trading at those tops. But of course it could. But you can see that the main thing here is that it takes some time. In the previous move, 1 week above, when we had the scare week, then we had several more weeks until we were able to finish with the capitulation events. So from the top to the last capitulation here, it was 7 weeks. So there is still that sort of 2 to 3 month period of that top forming and then some of those corrections to occur to wipe out some of the weak hands. So the new all-time high prices that are happening in the stock markets might be taking some of the limelight away from Bitcoin and cryptos. But of course, we're still going to see some of these altcoins try to press for new fresh prices. Just keep watching the volume. Watch how the volume's dropping off as the market's running up. Have a look at the RSI, how the RSI is dropping off as the market continues to run up. And you've got a bit of a bearish divergence happening here. I think it's imperative to keep watching this, especially if you're looking to be trading over the coming weeks and months, because the last thing you want to do is shoot all of your load at the top only to see the market come back and correct into a zone that you would be much happier buying in. Like and subscribe. We'll be back again for more updates on all of the markets. You know where you're at. It's your home of macro cycle analysis. I'll see you at the next one, guys. Take care and peace out.